All right, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Crypto Wolf, and doing a little, maybe something different, maybe not necessarily different, but it's been a while since we did this, since it's been a relatively slow week here on the charts, and today wasn't too much different. We did have a bit of a pullback. Well, let me show you while I say it here. Did have a bit of a pullback to that smaller golden pocket right there. Look at that, bounce right off of it. It took a little bit of a bounce and now potentially heading back down to it. So we'll see what happens with that. But, the main thing I wanted to talk about today was if you're watching this, you may want to pause it, go head over to the kitchen, grab your tin foil, grab your starter cap and start lining it with the tin foil, because we're going to get into a little interesting discussion here. And I know this channel's generally been, for the most part, about trading, but, I've been squeezing little stuff in there here and there as well, part of it just being like some psychology type stuff that overlaps with regular life as well as trading. And part of this discussion is going to be about some of the stuff going on right now that maybe isn't necessarily talked about all that much, depending on the circles you may travel in. And there's a particular meeting that is going on right now where it's not so much that the decisions that are going to be driving world policy are being made, but it's where they're being implemented. And if you are unfamiliar, that is, if I say the word, I'm going to get that stupid little box below this video on YouTube. But this guy right here, it's the 2022, screw it, Bilderberg meeting. And decent little quick article over here on ZeroHedge if you're not familiar with what that is. Basically, it is a meeting where top people from government, business, finance, NGOs, think tanks, all the global elite muckety mucks come and they have these meetings and they talk about these various topics. And they just over the last number, like maybe what, 4 or 5 years or so, they finally got enough publicity that they stopped denying the fact that it exists altogether, and they came out with the official website now, and they put out the official discussion topics and the mostly accurate attendee list, although they always do sneak people in that aren't on the list, even if it's just for like 1 or 2 topics. But the topics for this year should be fairly interesting. You could have guessed what they were going to be ahead of time, but we got geopolitical realignments, and all of these are euphemisms, if you will. And it's fairly obvious, if you know anything about corporate speak. I mean, nobody spells anything out in complete honesty, so you kind of don't necessarily have to read between the lines, but you know what they're talking about. So geopolitical realignments. Whether it be the shifting power balance between the West and China and Russia and, that block over there with Iran and all them. But more so than that is the rise of populism. And I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago, one of these topics legitimately was called the rise of populism. And it was when Trump was in office or whatever, and they were getting, very worried about that, and legitimately so, because it hasn't gone away. If anything, it's grown all over the world in all the countries. Number 2, NATO challenges, obviously, Ukraine situation. Big pushes there lately with the U.S. just trying to flood as much armaments over there to keep things going as they can, which is kind of ridiculous at this point, because we've had both Russia and Ukraine say that they'd be willing to go to the table and talk and potentially negotiate an end to it. And despite that, the U.S. in particular, but other Western countries are like, oh, hell no. Like, here, we're going to send you guys some missiles. Like, okay, we'll upgrade you. Like, no. We got the good stuff. We've been holding back a little bit, but we're going to give you the big boy toys now. Just stay away from that table. Let's just keep this going a little bit. And so, that's what they're going to be talking about there. Then China, been a big, this time they don't even have any pretense of, a topic. It just says China. And that's been one of the main topics for years now, every single time. probably a little different than most people might expect, although there's a little change going on lately where China has broken a little bit with these particular groups, whereas they used to be more in step together, and lately China's really been almost taking this big push toward more independence, if you will, and they've kind of gotten away from some of the global institutions. Obviously, World Health Organization, they basically took that over. World Trade Organization, they're making big moves in, but they're kind of turning into more of a maverick at this point. Indo-Pacific realignment, similar situation. A little more going on there. Sino-US tech competition. That's a big one, particularly dealing with Taiwan, and we need some more diversification of chip production, that's for sure. I know they're doing a little bit here. I think Samsung is in the process of building a gigantic plant, so that could be helpful, but it's going to take a little while. Russia, obviously, it's been a topic here for years now, whether it's just blame everything on them or they're actually doing something now, but they broke away from this group and broke away from the plan a while back, and they've been very upset about it, particularly since toward the end of Obama's tenure, where they really started pushing hard against Russia. Continuity of government and the economy, that one is one of those topics that you just don't want to see on this list. I mean, anytime you see that COG phrase, ugh. I mean, if that doesn't give you goosebumps in the willies, I don't know what does. If you don't know what's up with that, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. You got years of backstory on that one, but it's generally not related to anything good for the regular people. 8, disruption of the global financial system. I have a feeling that crypto is going to be a significant aspect of that discussion, because, whenever they talk about cryptocurrencies, in terms of global financial system, they're always calling it a disruptor because people want to get away from their managed system, and it just, the benefits that crypto has in and of itself of just largely not having to deal with their BS and them being able to tax and trace every little bit. But obviously they've been cracking down more so than ever just in this last year. The topic has come up in practically every country around the world. Now you got New York talking about banning Bitcoin mining. It's just, Number 9, disinformation. If that hasn't been the buzzword of the year, I don't know what is. We all know what it is. It's basically just propaganda, cut down on any dissenting points, opinions, or facts. Number 10, energy security and sustainability. The sustainability one, if you're familiar with anything having to do with the UN, they've had their goals for sustainable development, whether it be Agenda 21 or 2030 Agenda or Great Reset, all that stuff, all of it has generally revolved around the little buzzword sustainability, going all the way back to John P. Eric Holder? John P. Holdren, I think it was, his eco science. Decades old, laid all this stuff out ahead of time. If you're wondering why gas prices and all this stuff's going crazy right now, it goes all the way back there. It was written in the 70s. I mean, none of this stuff is new. All of it's been in line for a long time now. Energy security is kind of interesting because we're at a point now where we're even seeing pushback from a lot of the corporate world because, they made this giant push. Oh, we got to get toward sustainability and green energy and, wind and solar, even though, they completely just left nuclear out of the equation, which is stupid. If you really cared about, emissions and stuff, then you wouldn't just give that one the boot. But you're talking about energy security, and it's to the point where, all over they're saying, hey, expect blackouts this summer, expect potential blackouts in the winter. If the winters start getting colder, then it's going to get even worse. And so the biggest thing is they made a push where they want to implement all this green energy stuff. But the problem is you can't get rid of the old system until the new system is in place. That's okay, I'm going to sell my house, and after I sell the house, now I'm going to start looking for a new one. Well, you're going to be homeless out on the street until you do. So it's just stupid. It's the same thing they're doing. So, and you can only attribute so much to incompetence. I mean, let's be honest. At a certain point, you know what you're doing. You know what the effects are going to be. It's not like nobody's warned them. So clearly there's a bit of purpose in there. Post-pandemic health. Yeah, that one's perfunctory at that point. Fragmentation of democratic societies. Man, I bet you that one's just going to be an hour or two of doublespeak. I don't even want to hear what that one will be about. Trade and deglobalization. This one is kind of a continuation of previous year's topics, which is interesting because we are seeing more and more, and not just in the US and not just in the West, a push to get away from globalization, because clearly it is not working out well for us. You know, maybe for, you know, transnational corporations and, you know, big finance bankers and capital and all those people, but the people are kind of getting fed up with it, because at the end of the day, we're getting screwed, and it doesn't seem like anybody else is really even winning. You know, it'd be one thing if third world countries like, hey, they're propping up, they're doing better, and hey, all right, you know, we're working together, we're doing trade and all that stuff, and everybody wins. But you look at everything and it's like, well, bullshit, because everybody's losing. And Ukraine and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, all right. So that is basically the topics for this year. Interesting little picture here, how the Bilderberg group controls the world. And if you don't know, so basically the way it's organized is you have like a steering committee, which are like kind of permanent members that are always part of the group, but most of the attendees change from year to year, or, you know, they'll come now and then. Some of them are pretty much mainstays, like Eric Schmidt, you know, anybody from the big tech companies, from, you know, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, they're going to be there every single year. And if you want, I'll put a link to this, and if you want to see the full list of attendees, it's quite a big one. But I mean, another interesting thing I saw somebody point out was that, you know, they're talking a lot about Russia and the Ukraine situation and all that. And a little bit different this year than I've seen in the past is you basically have a lot of the top people in departments and groups that have anything to do with planning war. Let's see if we can find, you know, Office of Secretary of Defense, National Security Council. I know they have the head of like cybersecurity. Oh, here we go. Director of Cybersecurity Infrastructure, New American Security. There's a whole group of people, and so kind of coming at it from, you know, naval analysis. They have all these people from defense policy that are showing up. So kind of makes you think that we certainly have not seen the end of the Ukraine situation, or that we're even getting close to it. Paul Joseph Watson, shout out to him. CEO of Pfizer, head of the CIA, director of NSC, vice president of Facebook, King of Holland, secretary general of NATO. And if you don't know where it started, it actually started at the Bilderberg Hotel, and was started basically by, you know, the Rockefeller and Kissinger group of buddies back then. But if you want to know a little bit of the history, you know, Prince Bernhard, King of the Netherlands or whatever, was one of the big founders. If you want to know, I'll put the link in the description. But I wanted to play a little bit of this. It's just a compilation of clips. If you don't know who Yuval Noah Harari is, you're kind of missing out on where the world is going. Basically, this guy is probably the most influential person on the planet right now. And so if you want to know where the world is going, what direction we're going, you just need to listen to this guy. He's kind of the right-hand man to Klaus Schwab over at World Economic Forum. Works closely with him, but also, the people in these top positions over there, they're working with everybody. And what they read from some of the top people in the areas that they're interested in, put it all together, go to all these little conferences and talks and interviews and all this stuff. And these are the people that are being listened to by, top policymakers and CEOs and all this. You could even go back, I think it was even Barack Obama said, like, if there was one person that he recommended to read his book or listen to, it was this guy. And that he was like the most influential person that he had ever read. So let me turn the volume up a little bit.
We need some kind of global loyalty and global identity.
Now, we did have countries that did a good job. Australia is an example. So we have to create a new team. I believe we should create what I call the GERM team. GERM stands for Global Epidemic Response and Mobilization. Their only priority
issues on our agenda.
1918 is eye-opening.
The response to COVID should be the establishment of a global healthcare system, a basic healthcare system for the entire human race. We need some kind of global loyalty and global identity.
Global loyalty and global identity. If you are familiar with the social credit score that they do over in China, there's been a lot of pushing, not necessarily behind the scenes, but somewhat quietly, a lot of pushing for the same thing in Europe and in the US. And they're using the COVID situation to tie it in together so that they could tie it to health, whether it was, for the V passports and things like that. But let's see.
Group is full-time. Their only priority is pandemic prevention.
With all the current issues on our agenda, we tend to forget that we are in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, which accelerates global change in much more comprehensive and faster ways than the previous three revolutions.
And you see, the difference of this fourth industrial revolution is it doesn't change what you are doing. It changes you. If you take genetic editing, right. Just as an example, it's you who are changed. Yeah. And of course, this has a big impact on your identity.
We need to realize that humans are now hackable animals. You can hack them. A good two-way communication system, direct communication system between brains and computers, this is kind of the watershed moment. Once you have a good two-way, nobody has any idea what happens after that.
And I just wanted to say this too on the subject. It's kind of interesting because if we had, brain chips and augmented people, I guess you could say, on its face, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. Like, I would legitimately like to have, something that could make your memory work better to where you could remember anything that ever got stored, in your brain, in your memory. If you could think faster, the whole 9 yards, like anything that could accelerate brain activity, almost like what was that movie Limitless with the little clear pills that the dude had, and it basically made you like a super genius. God, who wouldn't love to do that? The problem is who's making it, and what backdoors are in there. Is there any sort of remote control within it? Is it data mining? Let's face it, all the social medias, damn near every website, anything that Google has ads on or anything like that is always constantly tracking and logging and adding to your profile and things like that. And it's a very potentially dangerous little razor's edge to have something that can store your thoughts, that can data mine what's in your head. So, I mean, you know, it's kind of hard to hide how you're feeling, what you're thinking, as opposed to, you know, you can always keep your mouth shut. You can always just not type something on a Facebook comment or on YouTube or something. But it's a whole nother thing to, you know, to have a chip in your head that could potentially be sending that data somewhere that you might not want it. And just like the topic going on right now with this disinformation, you've seen a lot of the big push that they're doing right now, where they've been caught just countless times suppressing and censoring just true statements, straight up facts, actual experiences, actual data, calling it disinformation. And at that point, it's clear that it's not about whether it's true or false or right or wrong. It's about whether it goes against the narrative. And so to give enough power that they could know what's going through people's heads and say, oh, okay, you know, we got a bunch of thought criminals over here. Like, these people aren't with the program. They're not buying it. They're planning to, you know, peacefully decline or just, you know, withdraw consent from what we're trying to do. Yeah, you could imagine where that's going. I mean, God forbid you even start getting into some kind of pre-crime, which, before everybody thinks it's absolutely crazy, they actually, like, lightweight implemented a similar kind of thing. I think it was in LA or something, where it was based off of like algorithms, off of what you posted online and things like that. And they wouldn't necessarily like send you to prison for murder before you killed anybody, but they could detain you or take you into custody, or even potentially, I think it was like put you on house arrest or something, if you got flagged in the system that it thought that maybe you would do something violent, possibly. So, you know, it's not beyond the realm of possibility. But yeah, I mean, I would love to have something that would make you super smart with great memory and be able to, you know, rapid recall. And yeah, it'd be great for trading, for learning, for reading, for math, like all that stuff. But not to mention my memory sucks. So yeah, but you know, what if it gets hacked? What if, you know, you do something they don't like and they shut it off, and now your brain works worse than it did before? Who knows? But it's an interesting subject.
I think maybe in a couple of decades, when people look back, the thing they will remember from the COVID crisis is this is the moment when everything went digital. And if this was the moment when everything became monitored, that we agreed to be surveyed all the time.
The time when we agreed to be surveilled all the time. And I skipped over it at the beginning because it was a real quick one, and I was trying to get to some of this stuff further in here that I remembered seeing yesterday. But he was even talking about how, you know, how they've already developed the means to surveil you internally, because you have you know, stuff that they could, you know, put in your blood, put in medication and things like that, that could keep up with, you know, they say, oh, it checks your vitals and you can see it on your phone and it can look for viruses and white blood cells and yada, yada, yada. But I mean, they flat out say that, you know, they can use it to surveil the inside of you. I mean, what if, you know, what if you're drinking too much or doing drugs or something like that? I mean, are they going to come arrest you because your own blood snitched on you? I mean, you know, not that I even do that anymore, but it's a little much.
Not just in authoritarian regimes, but even in democracies. And maybe most importantly at all, this was the moment when surveillance started going under the skin. I think that the big process that's happening right now in the world is hacking human beings, the ability to hack humans, to understand deeply what's happening within you, what makes you go. And for that, the most important data is not what you read and who you meet and what you buy, it's what's happening inside your body. So we had these two big revolutions, the computer science revolution, or the infotech revolution, and the revolution in the biological sciences. And they are still separate, but they are about to merge.
History is truly at a turning point. We do not yet know the full extent and the systemic and structural changes which will happen.
God, is this dude not like the cliche Bond villain or what? Like, I can't help but think it every time I see this dude, let alone like when he was doing the little ceremony thing where he's got like the Emperor Palpatine robe on. Oh, Jesus. All right, my bad.
However, we do know that global energy systems, food systems, and supply chains will be deeply affected.
Yeah, we're seeing that right now. And you know, and that's just it too, because like, and it's understandable some skepticism about deeper meaning into it and all that, because on its face, I mean, none of it like sounds all that bad. Obviously, surveillance under the skin thing, it's kind of creepy, but on its face, you know, most of it doesn't necessarily sound that bad. You know, it's the next step of a, you know, tech revolution is to start adding in bioscience and nanoscience and all that stuff. But you know, if you have to trust who's behind it, because at this point we're not just talking about an app that you can choose to open on your phone, or a website you choose to go to, or a service that you choose to use. You know, you're talking about something that's going to be inside you that you can't just like, you know what, I don't like this, like I'm canceling my subscription, like sorry, like it's already in you. So, you know, when you got to trust the people behind it, this is not the group that has earned very much trust.
They're not going to stop. Britain is already talking about giving up sovereignty. People in Ireland are already saying, what can we do? What can we do? There are 198 countries that are, you know, discussing giving up sovereignty.
40 countries have already signed on, including the big guys, the EU, the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Norway, Switzerland, the real countries. 40 countries have already signed on. So presumably they already have the votes. So the vote will be taken, and then there's a 6-month period before the actual vote becomes effective, and that's in November. And that's interesting timing, because no matter which party wins in the fall, presumably it won't matter, because this creates a platform for global governance. Because if you take healthcare decisions that we saw for the last 2.5 years have effectively destroyed American businesses, hurt people's lives, that authority now goes to Tedros at the WHO. So 99.4% of people in the world would be impacted by this, because 194 nations are a part of the WHO.
You know, luckily I'll say that, you know, that whole thing seems like it got voted down, at least here. And I can't imagine, I mean, it would take some serious finagling and probably some blackmailing, to be honest, but I don't think that one's going to fly here. So far it hasn't, thankfully. And I know the majority of the people themselves definitely aren't in favor of that. And if you're unfamiliar with the concept of power distance, it is a problem that definitely has been rearing its head here in the US, from firsthand experience. But the further the power distance increases, the less say in the matter or control, you know, individual people have over those decisions going on in government. So, you know, when they started out as, you know, local government kind of ran the show, you were close to that seat of power. You were close to the people who were making the decisions, and they were close to you to kind of gauge what people were thinking, how they were feeling, you know, where was everybody at? Like, is this what the people really want? And then as that distance got further, whether it be, you know, out to a state capital where, okay, they're still generally close, they're at least within the state. And then you get out to, you know, DC, where it's become this insulated bubble where most of the people working there just are completely detached from the real life of most of the people in the country. Well, if you were to send that power distance even further, all the way out to, you know, World Health Organization or UN or somebody like that, I mean, not only are they not elected by us. Not only do they likely never even have to step foot in this country or talk to anybody who lives here, they could arbitrarily make decisions that are affecting everybody. And obviously decisions aren't going to be the same whether you're in a rural area, or you're in downtown, or you're in the suburbs. You know, life is different in those places. So to paint it all with a broad brush, let alone multiple countries with a broad brush, is just stupid.
Religion is a human creation, and humans have created it to serve them and have been changing it again and again throughout history. Our biggest enemy is not really the virus, it's our own inner demons. It's hatred and greed and ignorance. It's corporations just wanting to make money out of this emergency. And it's people spreading and believing all kinds of ridiculous conspiracy theories instead of believing science.
Partially true on that one. I mean, definitely when we're talking about people kind of being their own worst enemies, I mean, God, nobody can deny that at this point. I mean, just go drive on a friggin' freeway. Somebody's going to piss you off for doing something stupid. But at the same time, there's definitely a gap between the whole like official narrative and what's really going on. And you can look into any discipline or aspect of science and talk to people who are on the ground doing peer-reviewed papers and research and publishing. And luckily, we're starting to see more, I hesitate to call it, but actual science making its way into journals and things like that. But everything is ruled by the official narrative at this point. That's where the grant money comes from. I mean, just look into how much money that they've been wasting looking for dark matter. Kind of ridiculous, even though other scientists have essentially figured out, what it is they were looking for, and it's not that. I mean, it's a combination of like plasma and dust and things like that, but that's off topic. But it goes for any, even into the health sector and things like that. And we've seen a great example of that lately, as it's taken a couple of years to basically have what many of us were saying in the beginning proven to be true, and they kind of just grudgingly admitted it, dragging their feet. And like same thing with the masks lately, like, even New York Times finally even admitted, even though, I mean, we had studies going, way back saying the exact same thing. But my bad, I digress. Just, he's partially true about people, their attitudes, and then overall culture has gotten to a point where it's just not very good for society anymore. Just, I don't know. I don't want to get too far into it, but if you ever saw Yuri Bezmenov and what he was talking about with the demoralization and things like that, dude nailed it spot on in the 80s. Told us it was already happening. Clear as day at this point.
I think the epidemic should actually warn us against the dangers of excessive nationalism, because this is a global pandemic, a global crisis, and it can only be dealt with through global cooperation. And, even if you manage to protect your own citizens, but the epidemic continues to rage in another country, it still endangers your form. Protect your... We are seeking the power of creation. With things like genetic engineering, like artificial intelligence, we are now not only seeking, we are actually gaining the power to create new kinds of living beings, or to re-engineer existing living beings.
This is where they kind of get into the whole thing where for a long time now they've had this goal, this drive to essentially make themselves gods, like lowercase g, but to them, no difference. And I'm pretty sure, I think it's at the end of this video, and I'm going to try to get to it here in a second, where, I mean, legitimately says that specifically that there's a divide between the elites and the regular people, and that the elites are developing these technologies and explaining the rationale of how they do in fact see themselves as gods, and they are getting close to achieving that status. No joke, not me. Hear it from the horse's mouth.
Microorganisms like viruses and bacteria, plants, animals, and even humans. And, in all mythologies, this was considered a divine power, the ability to engineer life. And we are now seeking this power for ourselves. And this is what I mean when I say that humans are trying to upgrade themselves into gods. Not the God from the Bible, but a God in the sense of able to re-engineer life. The conceptual change is already here. For most of history, death was considered the human destiny, part of some divine plan. So the wisest people in the world, they were not trying to overcome death. They were trying to explain death, to give it meaning. And usually the meaning of life came only after you died. In religions like Christianity or Hinduism, if there is no death, the whole religion doesn't make any sense. Because it's only what happens after you die that gives meaning to everything that happened.
And that part, I'm going to kind of argue with him a little bit there. So what he's kind of going for is saying that they want to upload themselves onto computers and basically, you know, live forever, have their consciousness live forever. And in so doing, they'll never die. And that's the goal that they're trying to reach for. Now, as far as only finding the meaning of life after you die, if that's the case, then I feel like you probably weren't doing life quite right. And what I mean by that is, you know, if it takes you till you're 90 on your deathbed to figure out the meaning of life, then, you know, what were you doing? You should have been thinking about it earlier. And if you were thinking about it earlier and you never came to a conclusion, well, you probably didn't experience the things that life is really meant for. So basically, I would just argue maybe increasing general positivity in the universe, whether it be through love or happiness or just great experiences or helping other people. You know, if it's, you know, having a family, raising kids, seeing your kids grow up to be great people, now they're, you know, passing it on and helping other people and making the world a better place. What more could you really ask for? I mean, yeah, as much as everybody wants to be, you know, successful and rich and not have to stress about bills and getting gray hairs over just day-to-day stuff and paycheck to paycheck, it's not necessarily the meaning of life. If anything, it's a helpful means to an end. And it's not necessarily the only means to that end, because I mean, I've been in situations that most people just be crying themselves to sleep and still been able to joke around and, you know, mess with people and tell fun stories and have a good time, despite the fact that it was a pretty damn depressing situation. But, you know, so really, I mean, you can be happy in any situation. So life basically is what you make it. And if you're looking for the meaning of life, I would argue that it's to make it something good and potentially to help make it something good for somebody else or multiple other people, or trying to do it for as many people as you can. And in the end, you know, just making the world itself into a better place, because if you had everybody kind of thinking the same way, well, you know, people would be looking out for each other. You wouldn't have people that were doing something like, you know, shutting down fossil fuel industry right now, despite the fact that it's going to hurt and harm people, you know, when you don't necessarily have a replacement ready and in place. You know, if your belief is that you're making the world a better place by implementing, you know, green energies and things like that, okay, nobody's stopping you. Help, push for it. Keep going with it. But you know, to cut people off before that's ready, you're not really creating a net positive at that point. You're just, you know, pushing people back down, particularly, you know, the poorest among us. So yeah, I would kind of argue that, you know, just trying to have that net positive outcome. What more meaning could really top that? I mean, you know, a whole bunch of just pleasure and self-gratification. Yeah, okay, you know, maybe it's nice for you, but anybody who's lived that life for years on end knows it becomes hollow. It becomes shallow after a while. So clearly that's not necessarily the answer. Unless you believe the answer is 42. I haven't quite figured out how that one works just yet. But according to Deep Thought, the answer to life and everything is 42. Let's see. Anybody close to 42? Nope, Solana's a little low. 88, 192, 296, 6, 50 cents, 9, 5, 5, 1, 76. Nope, no 42s on the list today. So, it's clearly not going to be crypto. If you know why the answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42, let me know in the comments. If you're still watching at this point, man, God bless you. Listen to me rant like this. But, you know, in the end, let me know. Was this interesting? Did you already know about some of the stuff like Harari there was talking about? It's been a big topic for a while. And, you know, I was over here looking and just scrolling through the headlines over here on like ZeroHedge or wherever it might be. It's a whole lot of negativity. I mean, shit, look at this. We got people falling off the cliff into hell over here. But a whole lot of negativity. So I wanted to try to maybe twist the negativity a little bit to potentially talk about something positive. Because, you know, just scrolling through here, yeah, it looks like we're getting close to the end or something. But I don't think it's the end. I think it's just going to be a rough time to buckle down and strengthen yourself to get through. Look at the market summer from hell begins and just one thing can stop it. If that doesn't sound like clickbait. Former Goldman Sachs PhD never returning to normal. Lumber price crashed 50%. Hey, you know, there's a little silver lining finally, I suppose. I doubt it'll make housing prices go down. New houses might come down a little bit. I heard they did a tad, but housing market's all jacked up too. Russia hits hobbled chip market, limiting export of noble gases. Oh, that's gonna suck. Ugh, don't even want to talk about that subject. That'll get me angry. Speaking of, peer-reviewed studies confirm blank mandates did not stop blank spread in schools and universities. Shocker. Hey, you know, there was another study that showed it on airplanes as well, and it was what we were saying all the way back in the very beginning. So, big middle finger to them. Especially all the people that were talking like we were crazy, like we didn't know what we were talking about, even though they've had studies for this shit for years. Sheesh. But yeah, the TV tells you something enough times and people just don't want to hear anything different. Just plug their ears, cover their eyes. That's it. China will partner with Russia to promote real democracy. That's ironic, considering China doesn't have anything close to it. But all right. New Republican bill will criminalize Supreme Court leaks. Isn't it already? Is Bitcoin immune to government regulation? All right, let's end it on this one here. Anybody see Top Gun yet? I keep forgetting I want to watch that. Maybe we'll watch it this weekend. When asked whether the Bitcoin network can be regulated or not, people tend to answer in a binary way. On one side, there are those who say that everything can be regulated. On the other, there are those who believe that Bitcoin is already irreversibly separated money from the state. I'm gonna shoot the middle on this one. I'm gonna say that, you know, the distributed distributed ledger itself, as it is right now, you know, is beyond that control and regulation. But on and off ramps can be controlled and regulated because they own the fiat system. If you got to change your fiat to Bitcoin, you got to wade through the muck in order to get to the Bitcoin. So, you know, we need a better solution for that problem. But all right, I'm going to cut it right there. Just looking at the charts real quick. Not much. Let's jump up here and just take a look at the larger scale here. You know, it's interesting. I saw Frankie Candles pretty much saying the exact same thing on BitBoy today that I was talking about in the video yesterday. Seems like everybody's waiting for at least one more dip, one more big wick. You know, I was saying in the short term that I kind of expected to get a higher low one for the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, hate to say hoping, but I'm kind of hoping for at least, you know, one more little run to the downside at least. Trying to hit that Black Friday sale. But we're still just kind of ranging to the side. Do got some bullish divergence going on right there on the 1 hour. So potentially a good sign for the weekend, although money flow is just crappy, just choppy. But all right, I'm going to cut it. I hope you all have a fantastic evening and have a good weekend. Probably make another one before the weekend's over and we'll be back to the normal subject. So keep being a badass and remember, life's too short. Increase the positive energy in the universe. And remember, the meaning to life, the universe, and everything is 42.